Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I am Andre Knott from Bally Sports. I am the in-game reporter for them. I've done some Cavalier games and Browns as well, and I appreciate you guys being here. But really, the star of the day is Tatyana McFadden. Thank you so much for being here. Truly an inspiration. How many times have you watched that movie? I'm just curious.
I love this film, so I think I've watched it about a dozen times, but it never gets old. So watching it, I always see something new, and it's always inspiring, and I just want to keep coming back and watching it.
It's All-Star Weekend here in Cleveland, but we may have the biggest All-Star. And when I was watching the film earlier this week, I was like, how am I going to remember all the things you've won? But your mom came up with the best. You have a card, and it was perfect because it was the perfect thing I could have because I've written down notes, 17 times world champion. When I say that to your name, what does that mean to you, and what's your true inspiration to getting to that point?
It's hard work, and it's dedication, and ultimately it's love and passion for the sport. So when I first got involved with sports, I got involved through a local para sports club in Baltimore called the Bennett Blazers, and I have a really unique backstory. I was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, and I was born with spina bifida, so that's where you have a hole in your back and your spinal column is sticking out. And during being born in 1989, the fall of communism, I didn't get operated on until 21 days later. So it was practically a miracle that I survived in those conditions, and shortly after that, because my birth mom didn't have the finances during that time to take care of me, I was moved to orphanage number 13, and they're all numbered. They're not labeled as anything else, and I grew up there for the first 6 years of my life with no medical treatment, no schooling, absolutely no wheelchair. I didn't even know a thing even existed. And I got around by scooting on the floor or walking on my hands. And, I think there was something built during that time. It was, that I can do it attitude from the very moment that I was living in the orphanage. The sixth year when I was adopted by my mom, that's when my life absolutely changed. And a lot of first things happened. I went to school for the first time. I had tons of surgeries, about 10 operations, because my legs were atrophied behind my back. And my parents thought, the best way for a child to get healthy is to do sports.
Right.
And so that's when I got involved with the local sports program, and I tried everything: ice hockey, wheelchair basketball, downhill skiing, fencing, and archery, and then I tried wheelchair racing, and I just fell in love with it. I don't know if it was the need for speed at the age of 7, but I loved it, and I took to it. And what I was learning through that sports program was first time of dreaming and first time setting goals, because every 7-year-old, if you go ask, they say, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a fighter, I want to be a basketball player or an Olympic athlete. But for me, I didn't know that I could dream and do all these things until I started doing sports. And so that's kind of where it led me to the person that I am today. And I just really took to wheelchair racing. And by the time I was 15 years old, I was finishing up 8th grade. And I told my parents I wanted to be an Olympic athlete. By that time, I was obsessed with wheelchair racing. I woke up to train, and then came home from school and trained, and just really enjoyed it. And my parents thought, okay, we'll find out where trials are going to be. And that was around the 2004 games in Athens. And I didn't know that at the time that the Paralympics even existed. It wasn't in the mainstream media like it is today. So my parents did the research, and I was 14 and a half, and I was really spunky and excited, and the youngest person to try out during that time for track and field. And so I knew that if I just came in top 3, that I would be on the team. And I had 2 superstitions, right? I braided my hair, and then I ate Skittles because I thought that was going to get me there. And so I made the team, and being on that podium with a silver and bronze medal in the 100-meter and 200-meter racers, I knew that I was destined to do this, and I knew that I wanted to change the sport forever.
Access. You talk about growing up and not having the ability to do some of these things, or not having the places, and you obviously had the best parents to push to find those places. Have you found through this that there's more access for people out there, or is it still difficult?
It's gotten better, but it's still difficult. And the reason why I'm here speaking today is because I really do believe that sports can parallel and equalize everything. I mean, we're seeing in women's soccer, we're seeing women want equal pay. Well, people with disabilities want the same thing. We're part of every culture and every subculture. And so at that moment, when I was 15 years old, I made a promise to myself that I will help teach and talk about Paralympic sport and disability at the same time, because in the US we have such a problem of thinking that disability is such a taboo, and you don't talk about it, you don't ask questions in public, we don't make jokes, and so that really kind of hurt us. And so the access is definitely growing, and we've increased hours with NBC, and athletes are becoming to be more celebrated, and sponsorships are coming out, and I really believe that because Paralympic athletes are getting these things, well, we're also talking about it in our own communities. So people with disabilities in our own communities are starting to have access and to education, jobs, and so it's definitely growing.
When we watch this, everyone's just watching the Olympics right now. I think, the great thing about the Olympics, and for someone that does my job, is there's a story. When you get to tell these stories of how athletes have gotten here. For you, how inspired have you been by other athletes with disabilities and what they've been able to do? Because as you watch these stories, I'm blown away and I'm motivated. But for you as an athlete that's there, how much do you get into the stories of others that have overcome so much?
That's why I love this film, because I wanted to meet every single athlete. So when we were all on Zoom together, because we made it during the pandemic, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been following you, I've been watching your story, but I've never got to meet you, and I found them more inspirational than myself. And they're just doing absolutely amazing things. So the 9 athletes that were featured in Rising Phoenix, they each have an incredible story, what they're fighting through, whether if it's meningitis or a massacre or cancer. We all have one common goal, and that is to make a better future for people with disabilities. And we're all doing it through the Paralympics by talking about it on that global stage. Because a lot of times, when Paralympic athletes go compete, sometimes they can't even get jobs, coming back home. And so that's why I love hearing other people's stories and being a producer of this film, because I was so drawn to it, and I wanted more than 9, but we only have so much time. So luckily we're doing other films to follow this.
Awesome.
And we've gotten such a good trail on this film. We won 2 Emmys.
I heard, yeah. Not only do you win gold medals, but now you're an Emmy winner as well. For other kids with disabilities, other people with disabilities, what advice would you give them that you've learned that's helped you?
I think the advice that I would give to anyone, not for people with disabilities, is that life isn't about what you don't have, it's what you do with the gifts that you're given. And I found that statement so important, because with social media these days, we spend so much time comparing. It doesn't matter who we are, if we have a disability or not. We go, in the running community, we're having the same thing of, I don't look like her, but she won. I don't think I can win, because I'm not built like that. And even a lot of athletes, globally, they're really talking about that as well. And so that's the advice that I give, especially with people with disabilities, because I'm very visible, right? You can tell that I have a physical disability. But it's so important for me not to compare myself to others, because I have my own strengths and weaknesses. I love racing. I'm obsessed with it, and I want to make a better person, helping to spread an awareness about disabilities. So yeah.
For someone that loves speed, you didn't like speed when you were in the snow. I found that to be interesting. What is it about in the snow that you didn't like the speed?
Downhill skiing.
It's scary.
It's scary, right? So that's why I chose cross-country skiing in Sochi, because downhill skiing, you're going 90 miles per hour. And it can be really icy. And if you've seen the Olympics on TV, and how the alpine skiers are skiing, yeah, like 90 miles per hour, and same thing with the Paralympic athletes. And yeah, it's hard.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. And I'm
really
like,
is.
yeah, I'm going to stick to cross-country skiing.
When you went back to Russia, my wife and I we've watched it 3 times now. My wife works with kids with disabilities and she's helped me understand and see through a different light what the smallest things can do to change not only the athletes with disabilities, but their families. And I know that now more because I've been able to be around it and see it. And I've had some of the families say to me, we're just happy that we can go to a pool and swim with our whole family, that we can be with more groups that look like us. And like you said, everyone can have different disabilities, but to be at that pool together and to have that same party that maybe their brothers or sisters have had, I think for a lot of us is visibility, seeing it. I can say that from my own point of view, that seeing it and feeling it changes your viewpoint and you want to help. How would you speak to others that maybe haven't seen the movie or know the whole story of yours to make them go out and say, go watch this and see what it does for you and your family?
And that's the power that we have in our hands right now is, the access we have digitally to see things, and to be advocates even more, and like this film that's on, Netflix, and I encourage people to see it. I encourage people to follow, the Paralympics and following Paralympic athletes as well, and following NBC and commenting and engaging, because that engagement in the data analysis really helps our sport. And that's so important. So, that goes probably for your wife's work. If she's on Facebook, she's getting that information out about what she does. And that trickles down to somebody else. And they say, hey, that's really cool what she's doing. Let's do it where we're doing. So that's the power that we have in our hands right now. And that's why I do like the social media part, because it allows good things to come out of it, and I've always made sure of that.
Who inspires you as an athlete?
That's a good question. 2 athletes have really inspired me. One was a Paralympic athlete, Chantal Petitclerc. She was one of my rivals, and she was such a big advocate. She's a Canadian wheelchair racer, and she was such a big advocate, and she really pushed Paralympics in Canada and helped to equalize it. She's done such a great job that trials and nationals are at the same time, right? And we can't do that yet. But her words have really done such an amazing job. And the second one would be the Williams sisters, Serena and Venus, because they are powerhouses, and they really made a name for themselves as strong women advocating for sports and equality and rights. And I know they haven't had it easy. And that's the same thing for Paralympic athletes. And so if they can do it and, do such amazing things for women and tennis, I want to do that the same for Paralympic sport.
I don't want to answer this question for you, but I wanted to bring up going back to Russia and watching that moment. And I had to pause it the other night just because it's heartwarming knowing your story, knowing you're going back home and your birth mother gets to see you. I don't want to ask, is that your best or your favorite Paralympic moment? But I have to ask, what is if it's not that?
Well, I have a few favorite moments. One is winning your first gold medal, right? That's definitely the top. That was in 2012, and that is, tied with the top, if not just edges out just a little bit more. It was just such a fulfilling moment, right? Going back, and it was always a dream of mine to have my birth family and my adopted family at one venue since I was such a young girl. And it spoke a lot. Just me being there spoke 1,000 words, right, about disability and adoption in Russia, because a lot of athletes or people with disabilities don't have the rights that we do here in the U.S. in Russia, and same thing with adoption. So it spoke 1,000 words for me just being there. And it was also me a way of saying thank you to her, having to do the hardest thing, giving up, a child in hoping for a better life and taking that risk. And so it was just such an amazing fulfillment.
You've broken a ton of records. You have a ton of medals. Is it intoxicating to continue to get them? Like, what inspires you to continue pushing? And what's next is the question I'll ask after that.
Maybe it is a little bit, and it's thriving and it's exciting, and we're in a time of sports where it's really exciting, and athletes, wheelchair races are getting better and faster, and technology is changing, and records are being broken left and right, and so I love competing right now. I have 24 major marathon wins. That's winning Boston, London, Chicago, New York. I hope to make it to 30 by the time my career, ends, but I think I can definitely do that, if not more. I want to win a tie with Chantal Petitclerc. She was the most decorated athlete in the Paralympics for track and field with 22 Paralympic medals, so I'm at 20. So Paris will be a big one for me in 2004, so breaking that record. And then LA is my dream, and having a home games in the US and really making a movement for the US Paralympic team in the United States.
I love it. I've loved athletes and sports my whole life, and I always ask athletes that have achieved a lot. I'm always like, what pushes you? What wakes you up and makes you work out when everybody else is asleep? What is the thing that pushes you, that makes you able to be a winner and to do what you've been able to accomplish?
I think the love of the sport, it really truly is the love of the sport, because, right now we're seeing, it really is love and passion, and it's not worrying so much about winning, but what am I doing for the sport? I feel like sometimes athletes think if I lost that no one's going to be proud of us, and that can be the hardest thing. But what I've done through sports is that create that advocacy, and what can we do next for the next year? How can we improve the marathon circuit? How can we improve the Paralympics? How can we get more women in the Paralympics to get involved, so when we compete in LA, we're going to be the most dominant for us in the United States. And so that's kind of what I look at. I kind of almost forget the records, even though I love chasing them. But in looking at the bigger picture, it's what keeps me going every single year, and that's why I've lasted for so long as well, and thankfully not being injured either, but just the love and passion.
Okay. Knock on wood on injury.
The wood.
Yeah, we'll get it. What do you hope people learn from your story? And I know that's a big question, but what do you truly want people to walk away from after they see this or hear you speak?
That is a great question. I think what I want people to walk away is, kind of what I mentioned earlier, that life isn't about what you don't have, it's what you do with the gifts that you're given. And to be an advocate for yourself and for others in your own work position, right? You can be an advocate for others in your work position. I'm an advocate for myself in my work position, and all of you can be advocates for yourselves and for other people at work. And so that's what I really, truly encourage, because we can all be Olympic athletes, right? We can all be Olympic champions by reaching certain quota, reaching certain goals, telling certain stories. And so that's really the parallel between you and I, is reaching that bigger picture and reaching a certain quota that we might have, whatever it is.
I didn't plan on doing this, but your mom,
yeah.
she told me she brought these and they're signed and they look awesome.
She's my momager.
Momager, I'm sorry. And she's really good. And I want to show this to everyone, I'm sorry. And I want you to tell people, what is it that you have written on here? Because I thought it was really cool when your mom told me.
Oh, it's the other poster.
Do I not have the right one?
Oh, yeah, this is the Netflix one.
Okay.
But the other poster, it says, you have the power to become anything you want to be. And I do love that, through that statement, because you do. You have the power to wake up and say, I want to be this, and to chase after your own dreams. And you are the only one that's kind of stopping you and saying no. And I have such a great support system that allows me to be the best through good days and bad days. I mean, not every day is going to be glamorous and perfect, but I do live by that statement.
And I want to say this right. Yasama?
Yasama.
Yasama.
Which means I can do it, and I can do it myself. It's a Russian phrase.
I like it. I want to put it somewhere. Anybody that wants these afterwards, you're more than welcome to come up and get these. Everybody needs a momager like yours. Mm-hmm. How cool is the journey you guys have had together? And I'm sure she's seen the toughest moments and the highest of moments for you.
She has. I actually have two wonderful moms, but they've been such an important journey in my life, and they've always believed that I can do anything. Any really crazy dream that I've had, like going to Sochi and skiing, and I've never skied before, they were like, yep, we'll support you. Let's go find where training camp is. And if I wanted to do the crazy marathon circuit like I did last year, I decided I wanted to do all of them after the Paralympics. They were like, okay, like we'll meet you in Boston, and we'll meet you in Chicago, we'll help you pack up. And my momager booked 2 flights to make sure I made one of them. And so it really is the team behind the team, and really that support system is so important.
Favorite place that you've gone?
Wow, that's a good
favorite
question.
games or favorite place?
I love the tropical, so I think Greece is absolutely beautiful. I think London Paralympics did such a great job paralleling between the Olympics and Paralympics. They called it the OP Games. And Tokyo was amazing. I mean, I love going to Japan. I love sushi and I love mochis. And so that was a really cool place to go to.
The film and showing the fans showing up in Rio, and just how inspirational it was to have fans cheering and having them there, especially seeing what happened in Atlanta. What does it mean? And there's so many different stories in this movie, obviously, but to have people come out and being involved in it and cheering, it was great to see it in the film. But as an athlete, what does that mean to you to see that?
Yeah. So what wasn't shown in the film that my sister and I did is that we started a GoFundMe. We were sitting, when we got the news about, the Rio Games and possibly not happening, my sister was actually living with me at the time in Champaign, and we thought, what can we do? So we made this raw video, and we made a GoFundMe, and it went like wildfire. And obviously my sister and I were going to be competing, so we had help to continue the GoFundMe because we couldn't obviously do both when we were training and traveling and competing. So the Paralympics took over, and Coldplay donated, and he's a really strong support of the Paralympics. So is Rihanna as well. So we've had really great support. And it was great to see the fans come out. It was great to see the school children come out. So because of the GoFundMe, we were able to get buses for the school kids, provided school lunches at the venue. And then they were able to watch, and that's so important to me because they're going to be the next generation and helping, not only the sport grow, but to say, Paralympics is awesome, and having a disability, who cares? Right. They're the next generation.
What's next for you?
Boston Marathon in April is what's next for me, and training for all the marathons in the fall, as well as working on the next films, creating more Paralympic awareness. So I'm really looking forward to it. And then Paris, and then.
I didn't even think I would ask you this, and then I'll ask the crowd if they have any questions. What have you learned about doing film? Because you just said something that I have had to deal with. You can't get everything in, right? Like all the stories that you want to tell. It makes making movies, or it makes it hard. Correct?
Yeah. What you learned about film is that you're going to have a lot of edits because, you start 10 miles long and you really do have to, trim down. And when I was working with the directors who also did McQueen, Ian and Peter on Netflix, my main goal was when I was talking with them is that we we want to not only tell the history of the Paralympics, you have certain bullet points to hit. But the visual effects was so important to me, capturing the muscles, capturing the elegance of the Paralympic athletes. I mean, Bebe in her gown in the beginning with her fencing sword, I mean, it just showed the elegance, not only for her, but for the sport. And then her fierceness, when they captured the 180 of her in her chair, doing the motions of fencing. So that was very important to me. When the film came out, I've gotten lots of questions of, was the film too elegant? And I was like, absolutely not. It was just perfect. So you kind of learn that you have all these bullet points and to try to really focus on that.
Yeah, you hit on it perfectly. Anyone in the audience have any questions or anything that they would like to ask of Tatyana?
Eli?
No, I thank you so much. Amazing. The conversation did talk about inspiration a little bit. I know you mentioned inspiration and talked about inspiration. And so I just love maybe, Tatyana, for you to share kind of where inspiration is both empowering for athletes with disabilities, that inspiration for sport in general, inspiration is amazing, but also sometimes inspiration for disability can sometimes be kind of paternalistic and feels like it's a different type of inspiration, like it kind of feels like a pity inspiration. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about that and like what do we need for that next generation for kids and to know that inspiration can be a great, kind of where do you think that can go?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a fine line of inspiration, right, where it can be good, and then almost where he was talking about like inspiration porn. When, I've had people come up to me, this was, before really the Paralympics is starting to take off, just going, to the airport and people coming up and saying, it's really good to see you out today, right? Or, having, or people coming up and being like, what's wrong? I wouldn't ask you, oh, what's wrong with you? Like,
pity, is that a word?
Yeah, the pittiness of just being a little more, naive, whereas the other inspiration, another good story that I have to tell is when I was at the track training, there was a son and father there, and the little boy was like, oh, like, Dad, like, what is that? That's really cool. And he was like, oh, it's a racing chair. She's a wheelchair racer. And so that, was so important to me because we're doing it right. The education is growing and people are starting to learn about Paralympic sport and about, track and marathons as well. And I think another story that just happened recently was when I was at the airport coming here, another little boy was saying that he was really tired and he wished that he had a wheelchair to go even faster. So, I love kids and I love their minds, but it's showing that, that disability doesn't really matter, that it's pretty cool and that growth and education just can happen, pretty naturally.
There's a quote, and if anybody else has a question, I won't get in the way, but, and I wrote it down, wanting to feel equal, wanting to make people see you as equal, was one of the statements made early in the movie. And that it grabbed me because I think I think I can say that as a black male in America, as we all want to be treated equal. And to me that hit home because it was like, I know that feeling. Right. How big is it to be able to say that and to just look at everyone and say, we just want what everybody else wants every single day. Is that the right way to frame that?
Exactly. People with disabilities want to feel the same way. They want to feel an equal counterpart to society, in everything. Access, when you go into hotels, when you go, shopping and et cetera. It's so important to feel an equal because what we forget is that people with disabilities are part of every culture and every subculture, right? And so I want to be able to go out and see billboards of a person with a disability or commercials with a person with a disability on it, right? Just with anything because, we live in homes and we have pets and, we drive cars and we travel the world and a lot of people don't, exactly know that we can do that. So I feel like if we can, have more commercials boom out, keep talking about it, yeah.
You should have a commercial like instantly, like
Thank
for
you.
Wheaties. There's
you.
got to be someone out there that's not heard the story. I think you could sell more. You could sell more cars than I could.
Watch out, Mom. He's taking over your job.
I don't know. She's pretty good. Anyone else have any other questions? Anything else that inspires them that want to say something to this world class, multiple times, 17 times world champion? I'm keeping this. I'm definitely keeping this. And I'm taking a poster as well. Anything else out there that anyone would like to ask or talk about? Well, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. No, take your time.
Thanks for being here. I was just wondering your take on what like youth sports programs can do in the community to offer really meaningful and important opportunities for kids to get involved that might not already exist in their communities.
Yeah, I think having sports in your own communities is so important because it allows them to not only feel like they're not alone, but it allows them to really goal orient and again to have that education process and that teaching as well. And I think that's why being here in this seminar and having this whole weekend with all of you is so important because sports is for everybody, jobs can be for everybody, and it's really great to talk about that. And sports is also can be a safe place to go to, and having kids be involved. They can say, well, that's so cool, like I can do that, but I never knew that I could do that. And it's also educating their parents that they can be anything that they want to be is really important.
Can I add one more thing? I think, and you would know this, information, getting people to the information. I think a lot of times many people don't know the rights they have. I've kind of found that in this situation, and once you find the rights, I know in what my wife does, a lot of times families don't know that, that they have the access that they can get. So I would say that, but I would think just hearing your story and more kids, because the other thing about sports that I'm saying that I find completely the best, sports brings people together. Mm-hmm. It gives you power that you would have. So I hope everybody can go out and find this and be able to do this.
Yeah, and to add to that, during the New York City Marathon, they have a program called, this is just an example, Team for Kids. And what I noticed is I was like, well, there's no wheelchair racing program or a program for kids with disabilities. Let's start it in that trifecta area. And they said, wow, like that's a really good idea. And sometimes it just takes one person. And I said, I will donate the first chair. Let's get this going. And it was such a great outcome of it. And to teach that, to have all the kids in one weekend on Saturday and Sundays to train together. You have the able-bodied kids and you have the kids with disabilities all together in one weekend. So you're actually teaching everyone there that everyone's an equal and that everyone is the same and we're all out there to have a really good time and just to do what we love and to run fast. And during that weekend we also have the kids run the 5K and the 400 meters and everyone runs together. Wow. And so it really created this mindset around that time and even on the weekends that every kid can be part of sports and that we're all the same at the end of the day, just doing what we love.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to say to the panel and everyone here?
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for being the inspiration that you are. We appreciate you so much, Tatyana. We have the momager brought the great posters that are already signed. If you guys want to come up and grab one after. Thank you guys all so much for being here. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend here in Cleveland.
Thank you.